Hare Krishna. So we'll resume our discussion from the third chapter of Bhagavad-gita, verse 25. Saktah karmanya vidvamsho yatha kurvanti bharata kuryad vidvams tatha shaktash chikrishur lokah sangraham. As the ignorant perform the duties with attachment to results, the learned may similarly act, but without attachment, for the sake of leading people on the right path. So, 5 verses, 26 to 32, Krishna will compare an attached and a detached worker. Right? So here he says that externally they will be the same. Now, ignorant is not a person who is in the mode of ignorance, right? Contextually, the ignorance is one who is ignorant of Atmagyan. So this is essentially a person who is performing karma, sakam karma, right? So he is performing his prescribed duties, but because he is ignorant of the position of the soul, he is performing with desire to enjoy, sakam, with the attachment to the result. And then Krishna says that the learned, the one who is situated at the position of Atmagyan, may similarly act. So similarly act means that they will also perform their prescribed duties. But the difference is that they are not attached to the duty or the result. So then why are they acting? For the sake of leading the people to the right path. Right? The expansion of the Yadyadashrati Shreshtas. Okay, so let's go to the next verse. Verse 26. Na buddhi bedam janayeda ajnanam karma sanginam joshayet sarva karmani vedvan yukta samacharan. So as not to disrupt the minds of ignorant men attached to the fruitive results of prescribed activities, a learned person should not induce them to stop work. Rather, by working in the spirit of devotion, he should engage them in all sorts of activities. So, Krishna talks about the why. Why should a learned person continue to perform his prescribed duties? Because by him not performing his prescribed duties, he would disrupt the minds of the ignorant people. So Krishna says, learned person should not induce them to stop work. Now, it's not that the person will go around telling people to give up the activities, but simply because such people are held as role models, the fact that they are not performing the prescribed duties would induce the others to also follow suit. Now, important to note that this is in the context of Atmagyan. Because in the context of Bhakti, it is actually recommended to induce people to stop performing fruitive activities. So in the 6th canto of the Bhagavatam, it's written that, and this is the Lord himself says, that a pure devotee who is fully accomplished in the science of devotional service will never instruct a foolish person to engage in fruitive activities. Right? So here the instruction is opposite. So instruction means either by speech or by example. The way to understand this distinction is that bhakti has a lot more potency than gyan. So when one is following the process of Atmagyan, Gyan Yoga, then the injunction is that they should continue to encourage the people to follow prescribed duties. Because that's the only way that they can reach the stage of from Sakam to Nishkam and from Nishkam to Atmagyan. But one who is following the process of bhakti realizes that bhakti is supremely independent. It is not predicated on the person performing sakam or nishkam or pious or impious activities, which is why devotees will induce people to take to the process of bhakti, understanding the potency of bhakti. That's why Krishna says, Sarvadharma pratyaje mam ekam sharanam vraja. Right? So when Krishna says Sarvadharman, then he's saying you give up all these dharmas of Karam Kand and Nishkam Karma and Gyan and Astang and simply become my devotee. So he is essentially glorifying the process of devotion. And we see that in the activities of Srila Prabhupada also. Like Prabhupada was taking very, very young men in the 20s and 30s and giving them sannyas. So even though they had not gotten through the purificatory process. Why? Because of his faith in the process of bhakti. Now Prabhupada can do it because he was an empowered acharya. Now the focus is more on allowing the person to practice bhakti while also having some deference to the prescribed activities. Right? So now we see more and more devotees in ISKCON are in the Grahastha ashram. And the recommendation there is that you follow your duties of a Grahastha, but you dovetail it to the process of devotion. Essentially, the process of Devi Varnashram. Okay, let's go to the next verse. Verse 27. Prakritehe kriyamanani gunahe karmani sarvashaha ahankara vimudatma kartaham iti manyate. The spirit soul, bewildered by the influence of false ego, thinks himself the doer of activities that are in actuality carried out by the three modes of material nature. So previous verses, Krishna has been talking about the fact that whether the person is in knowledge or whether the person is ignorant, he should perform his prescribed duties. Now Arjun may ask, then how do I distinguish between the two? Even though the distinction is internal, Arjun wants to know from a philosophical perspective. So Krishna will explain in two verses the difference between one who is attached and one who is detached. Right? So this verse talks about the person who is attached. Right? So prakritehe kriyamanani gunakarmani sarvashaha. That for such a person, all the activities are actually being conducted by the modes of material nature. But the person thinks kartaham iti manyate. The person thinks that I am doing it. Why? Because ahankara vimudatma. Because he is bewildered by false ego. Right? So Krishna introduces the concept of doership in this verse. This is actually one of the most quoted verses of Bhagavad-gita by Srila Prabhupada. In this, Krishna is going to, because karma is one of the key topics of Bhagavad-gita, related to karma is doer. Now, who is doing this karma? So, over the course of the Bhagavad-gita, Krishna will introduce us to three doers. He will introduce us to Prakriti, which he has done in this verse. He will introduce us to Jiva as the doer, and then as Paramatma as the doer. And then, of course, he will explain that how the actions are actually performed by a confluence of these, depending on the consciousness of the person. So, what is the consciousness of ahankar, vimudatma? That the person identifies himself with the body. So, all the actions of the body he considers himself to be the doer. Right? And that is why it is said that the actions are actually performed by the modes of material nature, which is synonymous to the body, which is a product of the modes of material nature. So Prabhupada says that the person in false ego takes all credit for doing everything independently, and that is the symptom of nescience. He does not know that his gross and subtle body is a creation of material nature under the order of the personality of Godhead, and as such his bodily and mental activities should be engaged in the service of Krishna in Krishna consciousness. Okay, moving on to the next verse. Okay, verse 28. Tattva-vittu mahabhavo guna-karma vibhagayoho guna-guneshu vartanta iti matva na sajjate. One who is in knowledge of the absolute truth, O mighty armed, does not engage himself in the senses and sense gratification, knowing well the difference between work in devotion and work for fruitive results. So the second verse that describes the position of a person who is enlightened. So the key phrase over here is that guna karma vibhagasha. Right? So if you later on we'll see Krishna uses the same verse, the same phrase in describing the varnashram system. It's chaturvarnyam maya shreshta guna karma vibhagasha. So guna is essentially propensity, and karma is activity. So a person who is enlightened, he knows that he is not the senses, and the senses being material, that he is not the guna, he is not the material senses, and he is also not karma. So he is also not the activities that are performed by the senses, because he knows the difference, vibhaga, from his true self. Right? So in this context, guna karma vibhaga means that he knows the difference between guna karma and his true self. Right? And that is why he is known as tattva-vitta. So tattva means essential truth. So tattva-vitta means that because he is the knower of the truth, he understands that he is neither the senses nor the actions that is performed by the senses. Right? And because of that, he acts without any attachment to them. So knowing that he is not the agent of manifesting those sense objects, he has no attachment to them. Right? So vibhagasha, he knows he is separate from guna and karma. However, he is attached to the Atma. Right? So Prabhupada says that he becomes naturally unattached to the activities of the material senses, which are all circumstantial and temporary. So this is the Tattvavit. This is the internal meditation of one who knows the truth, or who is Atma Jnani. Next verse. Verse 29. Prakritir guna samudah sajante guna karmashu tanak trishna vido mandan Kritashna vinnana vichalayet. Bewildered by the modes of material nature, the ignorant fully engage themselves in material activities and become attached. But the wise should not unsettle them, although these duties are inferior due to the performer's lack of knowledge. So Krishna is giving a little bit of a glimpse into what drives the ignorant. Right? So he says that because of the absorption of the senses in the objects which are both material, the jivas become bewildered. Right? Now, why should the wise not unsettle them? So, yes, the wives should unsettle them, but by being a role model of performing prescribed duties. So, an analogy that is used to explain this verse is that if a man is possessed by a ghost, then you can go to the man and 100 times say that you're a man, you're not a ghost. But it will not make any difference because the ghost has already overpowered the senses of a man. So how is such a man cured? By following the process recommended in the Vedas, by using mantras or jewels or medicines to expunge the ghost. Similarly, when a person is bewildered by the absorption in the object of the senses, then simply telling the person that don't be absorbed in the material conception is not going to help because the person is already bewildered. So what does the wise men do? They follow the prescribed process, which is that while you're absorbed in this material conception, do your prescribed duties, just like I am doing it. And the process is purifying. Because by the performance of the prescribed duties, one will gradually develop detachment from the material conception. So Srila Prabhupada talks about once again the higher platform of bhakti. So even though Krishna recommends against disturbing such persons, the devotees of the Lord are more compassionate than even the Lord himself. Prabhupada says that they are more kind than the Lord because they understand the purpose of the Lord. Consequently, they undertake all kinds of risks, even to the point of approaching ignorant men to try and engage them in acts of Krishna consciousness. Right? Now, again, the distinction here is that they are not trying to elevate these people who are ignorant to the perspective of Gyan, but they are using the potency of bhakti to protect themselves and the people in making advancement. So, the next set of verses will describe bhakti in greater details. Verse 30. Mai sarvani karmani sanyasadhyatma chetasha nirasi nirmamo bhutva yudhyasva vigatchvaraha. Therefore, O Arjun, surrendering all your work unto me, with full knowledge of me, without desires for profit, with no claims to proprietorship, and free from lethargy, fight. So Krishna is now taking Arjun to a higher platform. Right? So far, he was talking about Arjun fighting to set an example for others. Arjun fighting with detachment, nishkam karma, but still fighting to set an example for others. Now Krishna is taking Arjun to an even higher platform, saying that you fight for me. Right? He's saying that Mai sarvani karmani, you fight for me. Now one might say that if you're fighting for Krishna, then it's not really karma. So there's no need to be vigilant in performing the activities. But Krishna is refuting that. Right? So he says that, firstly he says that Viktajvara. So Viktajvara means without lethargy. So lethargy is a symptom of the mode of ignorance. So when Krishna says Viktajvara, he says that transcending the mode of ignorance. Then he says Nirmama. So Nirmama means that not considering yourself to be the enjoyer or the doer. So this mode of considering oneself to be the enjoyer and the doer is the mode of passion. So Krishna is saying that you transcend the mode of passion. So Viktajvara transcend the mode of ignorance. Then Nirmama transcend the mode of passion. And then Nirasihi, that without desire for profit. So this is now the spiritual conception. That Arjun might say that if I am not attached, then why should I fight? So Krishna says that in the spiritual conception, without desire for profit. So this is transcending the mode of goodness. So when one transcends the mode of goodness, one enters the mode of bhakti. Now this is still Mishra Bhakti. So Krishna then says, "My sarvani karmani," that do everything only for me. Now this is Shuddha Bhakti. So Krishna is taking Arjun through the different platforms to the stage of bhakti that transcend the mode of ignorance. Don't be lazy. Transcend the mode of passion. Do not consider yourself to be the doer. Transcend the mode of goodness. Act without the desire for profit. And enter into the stage where you only act for me. So essentially, Krishna is asking Arjun to fight on the platform of bhakti. Now, important to note that Krishna is not saying that when you enter the stage of bhakti, there is no need to act. In fact, he is emphasizing more so that act with full conviction, act without lethargy, act with full detachment, but nevertheless act. So even when one goes to the most elevated stage of bhakti, Krishna is still recommending the performance of prescribed duties. Next verse. Verse 31. Ye me matam idam nityam anutishtanti manavaha shraddhavanto nushuyanto mucchante tipikarmanabihi. Those persons who execute their duties according to my injunctions and who follow this teaching faithfully without envy become free from the bondage of fruitive actions. So Krishna in this verse is talking about the consequences of the previous verse. So in the previous verse, Krishna had instructed Arjun to act in a certain way. That with full knowledge of me, without desires, without claims of proprietorship, free of lethargy, surrendering work, you fight. What is the result of that? So Krishna is saying the result of that is that the person becomes free from the bondage of fruitive activities. Now, one thing to note here also is that Krishna is making two statements that are almost synonymous but not quite. So he says, those who execute the duties according to my injunctions and those who follow this teaching faithfully without envy. So they are almost the same, but they are a little different. The first one talks about those who are more advanced and they understand the injunctions of Krishna and they execute the duties according to the injunctions. So they implement what Krishna is asking them to do. Then there is the others who are still not purified. So they are not able to execute the duties according to Krishna's injunctions, but nevertheless they are submissive to the teachings. So Krishna says that who follow the teachings faithfully and without envy. Which means that even though they are not able to implement on it, they understand that whatever Krishna is saying needs to be followed. They attempt to follow it. So there is no envy in them towards Krishna. That, oh, Krishna is saying this, he doesn't know what he's saying, and let me follow somebody else. Their hearts are open to Krishna. But because of some past contamination, they are not able to actually act upon the teachings. So both of them, Krishna says, become free from the bondage of fruitive activities. So for the first category of people, since they are already acting according to the injunctions, they become free. For the second category, because they are submissive and because they are without envy, they will eventually be able to follow the instructions, and then they will also become free. So the next verse talks about the people who do not follow Krishna's instructions. Verse 32. Ye tvedad abhaya shuyanto nanutitashti mi matam sarva gyan vimudham stan vidhinasthana chetashaha. But those who out of envy disregard these teachings and do not follow them regularly are to be considered bereft of all knowledge, befooled and ruined in their endeavors for perfection. So the previous verse glorified those who followed the instructions of Krishna, and this verse talks about those who do not follow the instruction. Right? So he says that they are devoid of proper discrimination, achetasha, that they are ignorant, vimudhan, and the knowledge is, so the gyan is directed towards not the spirit but the body. And because of this, they are nashthan, they are lost. So Krishna is laying out the alternatives to Arjuna, that follow his instructions and enjoy spiritual elevation to the point of liberation, not follow the instructions and be nashthan, be completely ruined. So Prabhupada said that a disobedient person, however great he may be, is ignorant of his self and the Supreme Brahman, Paramatma, and the personality of Godhead due to a vacant heart. Therefore, there is no hope of perfection of life for him. So Arjuna may ask that given this contrast that Krishna has given, follow instructions and get perfection, do not follow instructions and be ruined, why would anybody not follow the instructions of Krishna? So this is answered in the next verse by Krishna. Verse 33. Sadrasham cheshtate swasyaha prakriti jnanavanapi prakritim yanti bhutani nigraha kim karishyati. Even a man of knowledge acts according to his own nature, for everyone follows the nature he has acquired from the three modes. What can repression accomplish? So this is the reason that Krishna says that even knowing the consequences of not following his instructions, which essentially are the injunctions of the Vedas, even knowing that it would result to ruination, people still are unable to follow the injunctions. Why? Because of their nature. And how powerful is this nature? So nature is the modes of material nature, the propensity of the person. So how powerful it is? Krishna says that even a man of knowledge. So one might say that a person who is ignorant, you can expect the person to be ignorant of the instructions of Krishna and to be ignorant of the need to control the activities according to his propensity. But here Krishna says that even a man of knowledge, so even a person who has discrimination, is unable to conquer the three modes. So Arjun might say that why not externally force them to act? Because your instructions are so potent. So maybe as a king, I can externally force people to act according to your instructions. Krishna says will not work. So he says, what can repression accomplish? Because the modes are so strong. They carry the mind even of an aspiring transcendentalist, what to speak of one who is overtly interested in only sense gratification. Because these modes are acquired from past lives and they are now active under the current environment. So Arjun may ask that, Krishna, if you are saying that even a person of discrimination is forced to act helplessly, then why does the scriptures even give so many instructions? What's the point of the Bhagavad-gita? Because when the person read it and they say, I will still act according to my nature, then what's the point of the Vedas? What's the point of the Bhagavad-gita? So Krishna will address that in the next verse. Okay, verse 34. Indriyasyarthe ragadveshau vyavasthitau tayornavasham agachet tau hayasya paripanthinau. There are principles to regulate attachment and aversion pertaining to the senses and their objects. One should not come under the control of such attachment and aversion because they are stumbling blocks on the path of self-realization. So first Krishna is saying that so initially he said that based on one's nature one will follow a certain path. Now he is talking about the position of the Vedas. So what does the Vedas have? They have principles to regulate attachment and aversion. So one may be attached to performing sinful activities and one may be averse to performing pious activities. Right? That's why Krishna says, don't come under the control of such attachment and aversion. So don't be attached to performing sinful activities and don't be averse to performing pious activities. Like the Vedas might say, give in charity. And the person may be averse to that instruction, saying, I've earned this money, I need to enjoy it. Or the Vedas might say that do not lust after other women. But the person may be attached to lusting after other women. So Krishna says, do not come under the control of such aversion and attachment. So what to do? There are principles to regulate. And so this is an important aspect, that the Vedas don't simply give you instructions. They also give you the process. And through the process, one is able to regulate this attachment and aversion. For instance, a man may be attached to lusting after other women. But then the Vedas give the Grahastha ashram, that if you cannot control your sex desire, marry and enjoy sex within the institution of marriage. Or a person may be averse to giving in charity. So then the Vedas might say that you may not give charity to the extent that it is needed, but give a token amount of charity. And by the way, when you give this charity, you will reap benefits manifold over. Right? So rather than simply giving an instruction and expecting the person to follow it, the Vedas offer a regulated process by which the person is gradually able to control his materialistic propensities. Okay, moving on to the next verse. Okay, so we'll now do verse 35. Shrehan swadharma vegunaha paradharmat swanushthita swadharme nidanam shreyaha paradharmo bhayavaha. It is far better to discharge one's prescribed duties, even though falsely, than others' duties perfectly. Destruction in the course of performing one's own duty is better than engaging in another's duties, for to follow another's path is dangerous. So, this is the last verse in Krishna's explanation of Nishkam Karma Yoga. He started in verse 17 of the chapter, and with this he concludes with a very important point, stressing on the importance to follow your swadharma, your own dharma according to your varnashram. Because Arjun might say that circumstantially I may be a Kshatriya, but what if I become a Brahman? And then I follow the duties of a Brahman perfectly. So as a Kshatriya, it's my duty to fight, but as a Brahman, non-violence. It's not my duty to fight. So what if I follow the duties of that Varna? So Krishna, anticipating that, he speaks this verse, that it is better to follow your own duty faultily rather than perform the duty of others perfectly. And there are three reasons that are given. One is that disregarding your own duty promotes the mood of acting whimsically. So today you are a Kshatriya, tomorrow you are a Brahman, day after you are a Vaishya. So essentially you are completely disregarding the system of varnashram by acting according to your own whims and fancies. Second is that disregarding can cause social disruption. Like Krishna had stressed how people follow leaders. And if Arjun suddenly in the battlefield from Kshatriya became a Brahman, other people may also do the same things. Brahman may become Kshatriyas, or Kshatriyas may become Vaishyas. So it will just create complete disorder in the society. And finally, one acquires a certain varna and ashram based on their own intrinsic tendencies. So Arjun by nature is a warrior. If he somehow became a Brahman, he would not give up his warrior spirit. So giving up one's own nature is very difficult. So because of that, Krishna is saying that do not consider giving up your own varna. In the 7th canto of the Bhagavatam, it is mentioned that there are 5 branches of irreligion. And one of them is pretentious religion, which means that you pretend to be something else. Another is religious principle for which one is unfit, that you're in one varna and then you're acting out for another varna. Now Arjun may say that there are examples of kings like Dhruva and Priyavrata Maharaj and Prithu, who actually became renunciates. But they have a different reason, that their ashram changed at the appropriate time. So Kshatriyas are allowed to take sannyas, but after they have completed all their prescribed duties at the right time. Arjun was not at the time when he was ready to take sannyas. Now Arjun might say, what about Dronacharya? And what about Kripacharya? They are Brahmans, but they are fighting. So clearly they are not following their varna. But it is different for them. Because even though they were born in a particular caste, by their own guna karma, they were different. So personalities like Parshuram and Vishwamitra and Dronacharya and Kripacharya, even though they were born of Brahmin parents, right from the beginning, they were trained as warriors. So if anything, it re-establishes the fact that one should act according to one's guna karma. Now Parshuram becoming a Kshatriya did not become a Brahman. Right? And Vishwamitra was a Kshatriya, and then later on he became a Brahman, but he did not switch back to becoming a Kshatriya. And so they were not whimsically changing their varna and ashram. So this concludes Krishna's explanation of Nishkam Karma and the importance of leading by example. And in the next set of verses, Arjun will ask Krishna of why one is not able to follow the injunctions of the Vedas. So we will do that in our next discussion. Okay. So thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.